The 2024 presidential race has seen no shortage of bombastic rhetoric, but Donald Trump's latest rally in New York has left audiences and the country stunned. In a rally echoing elements of history's darkest moments, Trump took center stage at Madison Square Garden and launched into a controversial speech, vilifying not only his political opponents, but U.S. generals, the media, and even disaster response efforts. What shocked viewers most was his scathing criticism of America's military leaders, branding them weak and stupid in a sweeping tirade. The explosive comments, delivered just days before the election, have set off waves of criticism from military veterans, political analysts, and American citizens alike. Trump's speech included bold threats to reinstate archaic laws from the 1700s to punish critics, echoed authoritarian tropes, and stoked fear about an enemy from within. This rally has amplified Trump's growing divide from traditional American values, and it's raised important questions about how far he's willing to go in his pursuit of power. In this video, we'll break down Trump's New York rally, exploring the controversial statements, analyzing his rhetoric, and examining the explosive backlash that has followed. The setting: Madison Square Garden and the historical parallels. Trump's decision to hold his rally at Madison Square Garden holds significant weight, especially given its historical context. In 1939, the same venue hosted an infamous pro-Nazi rally. By choosing this location, Trump appears to invoke similar imagery, appealing to a fervent base with rhetoric that taps into nationalist fervor. His campaign team has not confirmed whether this connection was intentional, but the choice of location and the staging drew comparisons immediately. For those familiar with history, this rally's optics and its implications are difficult to ignore. Enemy from within: Trump's alarming rhetoric on American opposition. In one of the rally's most contentious moments, Trump identified a supposed enemy from within, referring to political rivals and dissenting Americans. He denounced Democratic leaders as mere vessels of a vicious radical left machine that, in his words, is working to undermine the country. This language is eerily reminiscent of Cold War-era paranoia and has been criticized for fostering division within the country at a time when unity is needed most. We're running against something far bigger than Joe or Kamala. It's a massive, vicious, crooked, radical left machine, Trump declared, gesturing emphatically as the crowd erupted in cheers. Trump's comments not only targeted his political opponents, but were designed to cast anyone who disagrees with him as part of an insidious plot. His repeated use of enemy from within has sparked widespread condemnation, with many pointing out that such language is unprecedented in modern American politics and risks inspiring violence against perceived enemies. Revisiting archaic laws. Trump calls for the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. During his speech, Trump pledged to reinstate the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a law that permitted the detention and expulsion of individuals based on their nationality in times of war. The law, one of the Alien and Sedition Acts, has not been actively enforced for decades. Trump's suggestion to invoke this centuries-old legislation as part of a crackdown on the media and political opposition is raising alarms. "I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, Trump said. Think of that. That's when they had law and order. For many Americans, Trump's call to revive outdated, authoritarian laws signals a willingness to weaponize the government against perceived adversaries. Civil rights advocates have slammed his remarks, calling them a direct threat to democratic norms and freedoms. Critics argue that Trump's proposal is not about law and order, but about silencing opposition and cementing his control over the country's political landscape. The media as fake news, encouraging hostility and distrust. Trump's disdain for the media is well documented, but his rally in Madison Square Garden took this resentment to a new level. He turned to the crowd, pointing at members of the press, and encouraged his supporters to chant "fake news" loudly and fervently. "That's a lot of fake news," he laughed, gesturing toward the press. "Mr. Speaker, I think that's a record." Such comments, which attempt to delegitimize the media, are typical of Trump's campaign strategy. However, the implications of this tactic cannot be overstated. By inciting his followers to distrust the media, Trump risks eroding a key pillar of democratic society. Media experts and analysts have pointed out that Trump's remarks endanger journalists and could potentially stoke violence against the press, a troubling trend already documented during his previous campaign rallies. Attacking U.S. military generals, weak and stupid. One of the rally's most outrageous moments came when Trump openly criticized U.S. military leadership, labeling generals such as General Mark Milley and General James Mattis as weak and stupid. "We had stupid generals like Milley and Mattis," he ranted, adding that the current military leadership was incapable of protecting American interests. This insult to the military establishment has sparked outrage among both veterans and civilians. Traditionally, American politicians honor military service, especially in public addresses. Trump's disparagement of generals as stupid not only dishonors the service of military leaders, but also has profound implications for military morale. Responses from veteran organizations, political figures, and former military leaders have flooded social media, condemning Trump's comments as disrespectful and divisive. Spreading misinformation on disaster relief, false claims about FEMA and hurricane aid. The rally also saw Trump spreading false information about disaster relief, specifically the aid allocated for Hurricane Helene victims. Trump alleged that FEMA had failed to respond to states like North Carolina and Florida due to funds supposedly diverted to support illegal immigrants. "They haven't even responded in North Carolina," Trump declared. "They spent all their money on bringing in illegal immigrants." In reality, FEMA had allocated substantial resources to hurricane-affected areas. Trump's comments have been criticized for potentially deterring people from seeking the assistance they need. FEMA spokespersons and state representatives have countered his statements, reassuring citizens that disaster relief remains available. Insults toward Vice President Kamala Harris and misleading poll claims. Trump's rhetoric did not spare Vice President Kamala Harris, whom he dismissed as a low IQ individual. These remarks are part of a long-standing pattern of Trump's personal attacks, often aiming to undermine women in leadership. In addition to this, he falsely claimed to be leading in Colorado polls, despite data showing otherwise. "Colorado is going to vote for us," he claimed, adding that he was popular even among Democrats in the state. Political analysts were quick to refute these statements, pointing out that Trump's claims about Colorado's polling numbers lack any basis in reality. Such misinformation has become a hallmark of Trump's rallies, where facts are often distorted to fit a narrative that appeals to his base. The backlash, a nation divided. The reaction to Trump's rally has been swift and fierce. Veteran organizations, political analysts, and average citizens have all expressed dismay at Trump's hostile language and divisive tactics. His willingness to alienate military leaders, threaten the media, and endorse archaic laws has alarmed those who fear his words could lead to further division and even violence. Organizations supporting veterans and military families have been particularly vocal, emphasizing that military leaders deserve respect, not insults. Public opinion on Trump's rhetoric remains starkly divided, with his supporters rallying behind his words while his detractors express grave concern about the future of American unity. Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most controversial events of the 2024 campaign season. His speech highlighted a deeply polarized nation, where rhetoric that questions American values is met with applause from some and outrage from others. Trump's divisive language, targeted attacks on American military leaders, and calls for outdated laws have painted a concerning picture of a potential second term under his leadership. As the election approaches, Trump's words serve as a stark reminder of the stakes involved. The American people must now decide whether this rhetoric aligns with their vision of the country's future. As voters head to the polls, the question remains, will America stand united, or will it allow division to tear it apart?